Progress. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. In our previous class, we were talking about a very important topic: how to raise children who love the Quran. And I believe that the Quran is the most important thing you could give your children, the most important gift you could give them in life. Because we have to understand that doing something called tarbiyah is raising our children to become adults, raising our children to make decisions, raising our children in the future to stand on their own. We do not want children that are dependent on their parents. So, for this reason, we might die at a young age. We don't know how long we're going to be with our children. So, we want to give them a gift, whether we are with them or not with them. They can stand alone. And that best gift that we could give them is the words of the Creator. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the Creator. He knows our children more than we know ourselves. So, for this reason, no matter how much advice we could give our children, our advice is not going to be better than the advice and the guidelines that the Creator who created me and my children gave to us. So, for this reason, the best gift you guys could give your children is the what? Is the Quran. So, for this reason, we are going to be talking about a Quran journey. And I want you guys to think about it as this way. Like, you guys know that sometimes when you guys take your children on a umrah, for instance, what do you guys do with that, that journey? You document it. You put pictures, photographs, and then when your children grow older, you're like, this is the day, on this day we went umrah and we did this and that, and look at your pictures and look at yourself. Here you are next to the Kaaba, and here you are, my dear daughter, in the Masjid Nabawi. And so it's like the memories of just remembering that important event in your life. You guys document so many things. You document their life when they first started to walk or to talk or to crawl, or when they first said mama or baba, or you document the first day of school, or when they graduated from preschool, or they graduated from high school, or they graduated from the university. You document so many things in life. But here I want you guys to pay attention to something. I truly want you guys to document the most beautiful journey that you and your children are going to be going on. It's your journey with the Quran, the journey with the words of the Creator. And this is not a journey only for your children. The most beautiful thing about it is that you and your children are going to be on that journey together, because you're going to be helping your child. And I want to tell you guys something. I mean, it doesn't mean even if you guys get a personal tutor to teach your child the Quran, that doesn't mean that your job is over and you can just put the Quran in the hands of that person who's teaching your son and daughter. You have to feel like there's a bond between you and your child in terms of the Quran. Okay, maybe some of you guys, your Arabic is not that strong, so you probably couldn't be able to teach them to recite the Quran or read the Quran with tajweed. But of course, you could at least work on explaining the Quran to them, answering their questions from the Quran. So, for this reason, it's going to be a journey that you and your son and daughter are going to be going on together, and it's going to make you stronger. And like I told you guys, when we talked about the relationship between a husband and a wife, many people would think that the relationship between the husband and wife starts off strong like this, and then it starts to get weaker. But actually, no, it's like a pyramid. And I told you guys at the beginning, it's like, here's your husband and here's you. Maybe physically and materialistically at the beginning of your marriage, you're going to be close. But here I'm talking about spiritually and knowing each other very well. So at the beginning, this is you and this is your husband. It's like the bottom of the pyramid. But when you guys love each other for the sake of Allah and the marriage goes on, what happens is, subhanAllah, it's like you're ascending into a pyramid. And at the end or the top of the pyramid, what happens? It gets close. And this is the way our journey with our children is going to be stronger. I'm sure that every one of you guys, as mothers and fathers, all of you guys strive to make a strong bond with your children, to have a strong relationship with your children. And the best way to do that, it's not by buying the materialistic things or giving them everything they want. Actually, it's by making your relationship with your child a relationship for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, looking to it as an amana. And so for this reason, you're trying your best. I mean, Allah is the one who guides people if they seek the guidance, but we have to do our job. And I think the strongest thing that will make our relationship, the bond stronger, is that we go on a journey with the Quran, with the words of Allah. And I'm sure that the barakah of the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to make our relationship really stronger. So that's one of the benefits of talking about raising children who love the Quran. It's going to make stronger bonds between you and your children. Also, it's going to make it easier for the tarbiyah process. I mean, if you start off at the beginning when they're young, teaching them the Quran, as they grow older, it's going to be easier because you guys are going to be on common ground. You're going to feel that there's common factors between you and your son and daughter because they know they're not doing it for you because you, mom or dad, said that. They're doing it for who? For Allah. So we're not going to have a lot of problems together. No, mom, I don't want to do it because you're telling them it's not my point of view, mom. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prescribed for me and you to do. So it's making your son and daughter, be on common grounds with you because they know that what you are talking, what you are preaching, it's not something personal from you. You yourself are commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another important factor about teaching your children Quran, so we said number one, it makes you guys stronger and closer because everything for the sake of Allah stays forever, but anything that's for a worldly thing, it goes. Number two, it's going to have common grounds, so you and your son and daughter, you guys are going to be thinking the same way because you guys are getting your information from the same source, which is the Quran. Number three, you guys, we know that we're living in a life of fitna. And the closer you get to the day of judgment, subhanAllah, the more the fitna and the trials and the obstacles are more and more. None of us know what would happen to us. Wars, people getting away from Islam, people rebelling against Islam. There are a lot of trials, and I don't have to go through them because each and every single one of you guys knows today how hard it is to raise children. It's very hard. And we always hear the word resilience. We all want our children to be resilient, to be strong, to be steadfast in the midst of the trials that they are going through. You guys, what could be better than giving them the Quran? That is going to be their strength. If anything happens to us, the Quran is going to be there for them, And so for this reason, and I'm saying this out of, I really do mean it, and I'm saying it out of experience. And I can tell you guys that like the things that are happening in Gaza, if you guys try to just picture it, I'm sure you guys will not understand it. You can't. Even the news, even the media will not describe what's happening in Gaza. They are going through a great trial, a very great trial. And for this reason, subhanAllah, you feel that why are they still going on? What's making them go on? What's making them so strong? Wallahi, it's the Quran. Wallahi, it is the Quran. For 20 years, they've been working in Gaza on building a generation of people who memorize the Quran, a generation of Muslims who understand the Quran. That's what they've been working on. That was their weapon. That was their, strength. So subhanAllah, it made out in the end. It did. It worked. So for this reason, you guys know you're not going to be with your children forever. They're going to go through a lot of trials. What would be better than giving them the gift of the Quran to make them be strong and steadfast? What made the Sahaba strong? What changed their life? The Quran. And the biggest proof about that shows that is you guys just look at them, how they were in the Jahiliyyah and how they became in Islam. We read about their stories, and many times you're like, could it be like that? You know, picture one of the Sahabiyat when her husband came home and she had just lost a kid. She lost her baby. And she was able to do all the things that a woman would do for her husband and not bring up the whole fact that her child died until she, did everything that she could for her husband. What made her strong? What made her steadfast? It was the Quran. So that gift that the Prophet ﷺ gave to his companions, it's the same gift we have today. What changed their lives is going to change our lives. And so for this reason, the Quran is a guidance. It's a changing point in your life. And I know a lot of people that went through trials, but with the Quran, giving the priority to the Quran, they were able to get out of all the misery and the problems that they were living in. And I'm sure that all of us are going through problems and obstacles. Sisters, make the Quran your ease. Make the Quran your way of, feeling the tranquility and the peace and the happiness. Okay? So the Quran has all the answers to our questions, and it's going to help us out, inshallah. As long as we've got the Quran, inshallah, we are safe. We are assured because the Quran is the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another thing I want to say is the way we approach the Quran. I want you guys to keep in mind two things that when you're reading the Quran, because this is a journey not only for your children, it's for you. I mean, the last class I was talking more about how you're giving this journey to your children and working on their journey. But I felt that I needed to go back and explain something. Before you give your children the Quran, work on yourself. Work on yourself. And I want you guys to pay attention when you're approaching the Quran to keep two things in mind. The first thing is give yourself to the surah. Like the surah that you're reading, like just go into the depth of it and give your whole mind to that surah. Okay? And I want you guys to feel that while you're reading this surah or these ayat, that it's like a personal letter to you from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah is sending you, yes, you, each and every single one of you. Allah sent you guys a message. I don't want you guys to think that this message is to the Muslim ummah or to just those who know Arabic or to the Muslim scholars. I want you guys to feel how special each and every one of you guys is, that Allah is sending you a message. He's sending you a personal letter, guidelines. I want you guys to feel the value and how special you guys are, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent these words to you to understand. So give the surah, give the ayah that you're reading, all the time and attention. And I want you guys to immerse yourself in every word in the surah. Like when you're talking about a surah and you're studying it, and I really do believe, sisters, that one of the best ways you guys can study a surah is to do something called Quran journaling. Like bring a piece of paper with you, or make some kind of notebook, and just start off with your Quran journey. You can go to tafsir books. You can go to, for instance, YouTube videos. MashaAllah, alhamdulillah, these days you've got a lot of tafsir videos in English that you guys can benefit from, and just sit there and write down the things that you learned from this surah. If there was a reason why this surah was sent down, a reason for the revelation, write down the story. Look at the hard words and write down their meanings, and just sit there on every ayah and understand what it means. Go back and reflect. I remember I told you guys you can go to Quran.com on the internet, and you can see how people reflect on every ayah. What are the life skills you learned? What are the things you understood from it? Write them down. And these things you can give to your child. You guys can make like a theme or a surah that you guys want to talk about every week, for instance, and you do your preparing and sit with your child and talk about it. So that's a very important thing that I want you guys to feel. And when you guys read the Quran, always read it with fresh eyes and humility. Be humble to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Seek Allah's guidance. Ask Allah to make you understand it. Go read the Quran with sincerity. Yeah, Sister Noor says QuranHive.com has word-by-word definitions and audio tafsir. Yes, from Nu'man Ali Khan. You guys know that when I gave you, thank you, Sister Noor, when I gave you guys the Luqman style, one of the, the basic main sources that I relied on was Nu'man Ali Khan's insight on Surah Luqman. And he's got a whole Bayyina Institute. So you guys can even, you guys can go to the application on the Apple Store and you can, upload it if you guys want. So mashallah, today you guys have a lot of people, but Nu'man Ali Khan, yes, he like majored in the tafsir. He gave most of his classes to tafsir and his lectures. So you can go to them. You'll find things for Umar Sulaiman Ashqar, and you can go back to many mufassirin. And just give it your time. You guys give the Quran the beginning of your day. The first thing you guys start off with on your day, in your day, is the Quran. Just wake up in the morning. If you guys drink coffee, you drink tea, just after you pray salah, the Prophet ﷺ said that the beginning of the day is the barakah. So you start off, you yourself, by yourself, not with your children. You just sit there and just, do your Quran journaling, write it down. Because I have to tell you guys something, just listening makes you forget. If you just are the type that's like you've got headphones on and you're working and you're listening, okay, you're going to benefit, but what's going to happen? You're going to benefit for just a certain period of time and then you're going to forget the information. No, you have to jot it down. You have to write it down. Okay. This way, if you want to go back to it, you can. And this way you have some kind of resource to go back to when you want to sit with your children and talk about this ayah or this surah. All right. So do this. Another thing I want you guys to look to the Quran is, we said that I want you guys to look to it as like a personal message from Allah to you by yourself. Okay. So feel this, how special you are. The next thing is, I want you guys to feel that it's a treasure. Like it's full of treasures. And subhanAllah, like today, if you read the surah, you will take a treasure. Tomorrow, if you read it again, you'll get a treasure. If you read it after 10 more years, you're going to get a treasure. So subhanAllah, every time you read the Quran, you come to understand the ayah from a certain perspective. And the more sincere you are in learning the Quran, the more Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens your heart and your mind to understand things. Okay? So for this reason, we have to teach this also to our children, that the Quran is a treasure. And who would know that there was a treasure and neglect it? So there's a treasure, you have to go after it. So that's a very important thing. So work on yourselves, sisters, before you work on your children. I wanted to say that because I felt that it was really important before I go on with the children. So it's your journey and your child's journey, inshallah. Now, last time we were talking about how to raise children who love the Quran. And as an introduction, we talked about how many parents, they sometimes look to the Quran education as something that's not very important. And we said that the Quran education is a priority and that we have to look to it as something very, very important. Just like we look to our education of our children. And we start thinking, how should I teach my child? Should he be homeschooled? Should he be a full-time student in the school? And I try to think of the best way to give my child the worldly education. But actually, the Quran is what shook the world, and it's what formed the best of people, and it's the forming of the civilization. So I said to the sisters that we have to look to the Quran as as a priority. And we gave an example from the story of Prophet Zakaria. And we talked about how Prophet Zakaria became a very old man, and his wife, could not have a child. And with that, he had no despair. Surah Maryam, you guys, because I know that many times when you're going through the tarbiyah process, I'm sure about this because I've gone through it. Many times you reach the stage where you just feel the despair. You're like, I give up. That's it. What's happening? I did not raise my child to do this and that. What is happening to me? I tried my best to be a good role model. So you just get frustrated. So for this reason, subhanAllah, when you read the story of Prophet Zakaria and how he asked for something that would be for most of us something impossible, but Allah gave him. He asked for a son, even though he was old and his wife couldn't have children, and Allah gave him. And here we talked about something very important, that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave Zakaria his son and named him Yahya, and Yahya was the first person to be given this name, one of the first things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told Yahya, and this is teaching us what should be our priority when we have children. What is the first type of education we have to work on? Allah said to him, Ya Yahya, khudh al-kitaba biquwwa, which means hold firmly to the revelation. So that was the first thing that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told Yahya and indirectly told Zakaria. So that's the first thing you have to think about when Allah blesses you with a child, how to give the revelation to your child with strength. And for your child to take the revelation, which is today the Quran, strongly, that means they have to take it seriously. That means they have to love it. That means they have to put it in their heart. That means they have to give it the primary focus of their time. So we as parents have to teach them that the Quran is the way to develop the wisdom. It's the way to develop the good character. It's your way to be able to make good decisions, because you are using the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know what's right and wrong. And I'm sure you guys want your children to be good decision makers, because you guys are not always going to be with your children when they have to make a decision. So you have to give them the guidelines. So if they've got the Quran inside of them and they understand the Quran, inshallah, when they make their decision, the first thing they're going to ask is, well, what does the Quran say about this and that? So you are helping them to make that decision. So from this perspective, that's why I wanted to talk about the Quran. It's also, learning things from the Quran about tarbiyah. Just like we took the Luqmani style and how he chose certain pieces of advice to give to his children. Well, also we're learning from the story of Zakaria and Yahya, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Ya Yahya, khudh al-kitaba biquwwa. So this is another tarbiyah thing we learn in life, a tarbiyah guideline, to make understanding the Quran and reading the Quran the most, a priority, the most important thing. So even before you have your child, when they're in your womb, you are thinking about your child's Quran journey. How do you guys think about education for your child? What school they're going to be studying in, what they're going to be, what career they're going to have in the future, where they're going to be living, and all of that stuff. Your first priority should be the what, you guys? The Quran. Because if you give them the Quran, you give them everything. Give them money, the money might go. Give them a house, the house, something might happen to it. But give them something that will stay with them forever. And you will benefit from it as well as them. I mean, every effort you guys put into the Quran, it's going to be hasanat for you guys. Allah said in the Quran, وَأَن لَيْسَ لِلْإِنسَانِ إِلَّا مَا سَعَى. Everybody gets what they strive for. And you guys having children, it's something you guys strive for. So every good deed they do, you get the hasanat for it. Picture yourself teaching your child Surah Al-Fatiha. Picture how many times, and for this reason, I want to tell you guys something. You guys know that like many times your children will be in a school or in the masjid, and sometimes they will learn surahs from, a teacher. But make it your priority, for instance, that the first person who teaches their child Surah Al-Fatiha is you. Why? Why especially Surah Al-Fatiha? Because picture how many times your child, when they pray, in every rak'ah, they're going to be reading Surah Al-Fatiha. So picture how many times you're going to get what? Hasanat. So that's why many Muslims, they always wanted that Surah Al-Fatiha, okay, maybe somebody could teach my child Surah Al-Ikhlas and Surah Al-Nas and Surah Al-Falaq, but no, Surah Al-Fatiha, that's my job, because I want to get the hasanat, So picture yourself not just teaching them Surah Al-Fatiha, but teaching them all of the Quran if you can. Try your best. I mean, even if you can't teach them to read the Quran or memorize the Quran, you could help them in memorizing. You can listen to them, or you can explain the meanings of the Quran. So try your best to get that ajr. That's the best ajr you can get, inshallah. And then we talked about the purpose of education, sisters, and we talked about how many times we care about, the schooling system. We were talking about that. We said that from grade kindergarten to grade 12, the way the school system works is they just want to have people that in the end they study something and they're employed. They work for those things. Like, for instance, we've got a doctor, or we've got a lawyer. You know, that's what they're working on. They're just working on this child in the end getting some kind of education that they can benefit from and to be employed by it. But they forget about giving the person the moral education, how to make them have good character. These are things that are in the Quran. So for this reason, we notice that we've got people that are secularists. For instance, they're very successful doctors, but morally they're bad. You know, they don't know their purpose in life. So what kind of benefit would it be for you to be, for instance, you know, to be the greatest doctor or the greatest lawyer, and you don't know your purpose on life, you know? So here, that's a contradiction. I mean, you got very strong worldly education, but the education that has to do with your purpose on life and answering the questions that are so important, the life skills, your afterlife, you know nothing about. So this is what the education process is doing to our children. They're making them secularists and having nothing to do with the afterlife. So no, we want them to get education, but at the same time, we want them to be strong in their deen, because the education they get is supposed to be making them stronger in the deen. And like I said, you know, previously, when you study biology, your teacher should be telling you, subhanallah, look at how the DNA and the RNA works. Subhanallah, look at to the laws of movement. Subhanallah, look at, when we're talking about chemistry, the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created this element, and so on. This is the way we should teach our children to be, to like relate between the education they get and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the afterlife. So we don't want just people that are, you know, they've got a shahada, they've got a degree, and when it comes to them understanding their purpose in life and having relationships with people, they don't understand how to live these life skills whatsoever. So this is what the educational system is. And that's why we say it's very important that with their education, they take the most important education, which is the Holy Quran. Because the Holy Quran, sisters, it answers the big questions. The big questions: why were you created? What's going to happen to me when I die? Is there a life after this life? You know, what is my purpose? What does Allah want from me? What is the relationship between me as a created, you know, creation, and Allah the creator? These are very important questions. And that's why you guys notice a lot of people, and I don't know if we're talking to reverts, but you know, you guys are free to answer my question or to comment on it. But I know that many reverts, like the way they were living their life before they reverted to Islam, I'm sure they were trying to answer a very important question, you know, um, what's my purpose in life? You know, I'm looking for the truth. I'm sure that a lot of reverts went through that question. I'm looking for the truth. So this truth is in the Holy Quran. So how could you neglect it and not give it to your children? The Quran is what makes your children morally right. So for this reason, if you notice the Prophet ﷺ, that's what he gave. The most important thing in life was to you know, give the companions this truth. This is the most important form of education. After that, the other forms of education come, you know, next. They're secondary. But the primary thing that we should work on is what? Is the Quran. Because if you understand the Quran, then everything you look to in life, you will look to it in a different angle, from a different perspective. There's a difference between a person who looks to life without the truth and a person who looks to life and they have the truth. Wallahi, it's like a person that's wearing glasses and they can see, you know? And without, so what makes you see life and understand life? And it makes sense. You're wearing these glasses, all right? So now you can see. These glasses we're talking about, it's the Holy Quran. It's what makes everything make sense. Without the Quran, nothing makes sense, you know? So what could be better than us giving our children the divine wisdom, which is in the Holy Quran? And we also talked about how, subhanAllah, there are certain countries in the world, especially in Northern Africa, Muslim countries like Mauritania, Mali, Somalia, Eritrea, Libya, how many of the parents in these countries, they make studying the Quran a priority. So for this reason, they start off with their children in memorizing the Quran. And after that, they give them the worldly education. So this is very important. So after you've mastered the Quran, after that, you will master everything, and things will make more sense. Yes. Okay, so Sister noticing, I'll be right back. Okay, no problem. All right. And we also talked about, sisters, about how to introduce the Quran. That was what we were mainly talking about last class. So we understood the importance and how it's a priority and how it's a journey that we should document. And so we can sit with our children and say, well, this was you, Mom. Look at that picture. This was when you were memorizing this surah. This is when you finished Juzu Amma. Document it. Make a celebration for that. Reward them for it. So today we're going to be talking about how to introduce the Quran. Last time what we talked about was, in order for you to introduce the Quran, sisters, you have to go through 3 phases, okay? 3 main phases. Because if you think about it, like after 17, 18, khalas, they are adults, okay? So in terms of the Quran, I mean, we don't want to go beyond the 17 years old. I think if we start with them young, when they're young, inshallah, if we've got a plan, that's a very important thing. If you plan, if you don't have a plan, you're not going to get anything done. And we talked about that. You have to be very organized in your life. If you're not organized, you're not going to get anywhere. You always have to have goals that you want to achieve. All right. Remember when we talked about waqsid fi mashyik, when Prophet Luqman told his son, waqsid fi mashyik, and we said walk with purpose. So yeah, part of us walking with purpose in life is to have some kind of goal and plan to make our children have an attachment with the Quran and love the Quran and be able to, if they can, memorize it and understand the Quran. All right. So we said we are going to go through 3 main phases. The first is when they're in your womb until 5 years. The second phase is from 5 to 10 years. And the last phase is from 10 to 17 years. That doesn't mean that after you're 17, your journey with the Quran finishes. No, actually, I think it's going to start even more and you're going to be stronger. But you as a parent, you're trying to work your way to have your child attached to the Quran so that it will stay with them forever. You know how like you built the bonds of love between you and your children? And even if they get married and even if they have children and even if they themselves become grandparents, they're still going to be attached to you because there's that great bond of motherhood and fatherhood. So what could be stronger than the bond between the slave and the creator? So for this reason, it doesn't mean when we're talking about 3 phases that after 17, their relationship with the Quran is going to be over. No, I think it's just going to become refreshed and stronger after that. Just like the relationship between you and your children, when they become adults, it gets stronger because now that they are parents, they're starting to, understand all the effort you put into parenting. So your child is like, oh my God, Mom, I'm sorry I gave you a hard time when I was a teenager. Now I really do understand the effort you put into giving me a good upbringing. So subhanallah, when you become a mom, you start to respect your mom even more. And so the same thing goes with the Quran. When you've got a strong attachment with the Quran when you're young, when you reach 17 and 18 and you're like, I feel that I'm stronger now, so now I'm going to reflect on the Quran even more. Okay, so we said the first phase was from 0 to 5. Now, if you notice, sisters, in every phase, you're going to try to focus on something, okay? Because you cannot take a phase and say this phase has nothing to do with the other phase. No, they relate with each other. We've got a plan. So every phase relies on the other one, okay? So the first thing, we want to make some kind of attachment with the Quran and make them love the Quran, which is from when they're in the womb till they become 5 years old. What is our primary focus? To make them love the Quran. Why? If you guys think about it, like when they're 2 or 3, it depends, they're just starting to be able to talk. So most of this period of time, actually, like you can say from 3, 4, 5, that's when they just learn to talk. They can barely talk, you know. So them memorizing the Quran, it's going to be a part of it, but it's not going to be the main part. Like if you want to talk about the memorizing, it's mainly going to be in the second phase. But here I want to start off the attachment. I want them to love the Quran. Okay. But what happens is a lot of parents, they do the opposite. They make their children hate the Quran and they start to spank them. Okay, leave the, leave the TV, leave what you're playing. Right now it's time for the Quran, and you start to, to treat them in a bad way. So instead of you making them love the Quran, you're making them what? Hate the Quran. So we're trying to make them attached to the Quran. Let's just go over that, and then we'll go on to what the new things we were talking about. So we said from the beginning, when they're first born until 5 years old, our major focus is on what? Making them love the Quran. And we gave 4 steps, 4 ways that you can make your child in this phase love the Quran. We said, number 1, keep reciting the Quran or playing the Quran at home. And we talked about how your child's brain is like a sponge, and the more they hear the Quran, they become familiar with the Quran, and they will start memorizing it without you realizing. So for this reason, if they keep hearing this surah many times, you will notice that, like, for instance, if something happened and you stopped, like for instance, you're reading Surah Kul A'udhu Birabbin Nas, and you're reading it, and then you stop, you'll notice that your child will come in and what? Say the end of the ayah. You're like, wow, how did you know that? You didn't even put any effort in teaching them that, but it's like their brains are like a sponge. So they became familiar with the Quran because it was repeated many times. So that's the first way of making them love the Quran. Let them hear it, let them become familiar with it, not just when they're babies, but also when they're in the mother's womb. We also said, number 2, the power of storytelling. We always want to give them bedtime stories. And I believe that, the period of time where we usually rely on bedtime stories is during that phase. I mean, okay, maybe when they're 7 and 8, you still do, but more of it is like when they're 3 and 4 and 5 years old. Why? Because they want to feel assured, and you don't want to put them in your bed and sleep with you. So you want to get them to go to sleep. So you tell them the bedtime story so that they can sleep. And we talked about how the power of storytelling, it's something great, it's something big. So we don't want to sit there and start telling them stories that are not real, or talk about Cinderella or Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs or Humpty Dumpty. No, we want to give them stories that will always stay in their minds, stories that are full of faith, righteousness, patience, kindness, obedience to Allah's commandments, stories that are truth. They're not, just fantasy stories. Stories that will give them spiritual guidance, stories that will give them moral education. So that's another way you can have your child during this phase love the Quran. So let them hear the Quran, try to give them the stories of the Quran. And if you guys noticed, you guys can go back to many things on the internet and find a lot of stories. I think I sent you guys also an article about stories from the Quran and how you can, explain them to them. And I gave you guys last time even a demonstration of Surah Al-Fil. And I told you guys, when you come to give your child the story that you're going to talk about, relate it to life. Like if they notice something is happening, like somebody lied, get what I'm saying? Or there was some kind of jealousy. So you can come and say, okay, I'm going to tell you a story about jealousy and the story of Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam. Relate it with something, because in the end, the whole thing about telling the story is not just making them, into the story, because just exciting them. No, the whole point of saying a story to your child is for them to get the benefit of it. Okay. So for this reason, before you say the story, you have to have some kind of lesson that you want your child to learn. And for them to learn a lesson, you have to relate it to the life they're living, so that they can learn from it. So we gave an example of Surah Al-Fil, and we explained from this surah that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't neglect people. Because many times your children might be seeing people going through oppression, and they might think that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not caring for those people, those kids, those women that are dying. And so we explained to them how the story of the Fil happened, and how Abraha and his army who came to destroy the Kaaba, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the end, Allah has his secret soldiers, which were the birds that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent to destroy Abraha and his army. And that teaches us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even though sometimes it takes a long time for Allah to give us the victory, but Allah doesn't neglect us. And Allah has wisdom. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills, inshallah, He's going to give victory to those people. So this is a very important thing. And you can use this kind of, strategy for any surah that you want to talk about. And like I said, you can find a lot of bedtime Quran stories. You can go to Amazon, you can go online, you'll find a lot of stories. But I mean, if you have knowledge of the Quranic stories, you yourself can go to the tafsir and get these stories. But of course, when you're talking about these stories, you have to be like really into them. Like, don't be dull and boring when you're saying it. No, you have to like try to give it some kind of animation and sound effects that makes your child be waiting for that story, something that it's fun to listen to. Another thing, which was step 3 we talked about, was you have to model that. You have to model reading the Quran. Your children have to look to you as a role model. They don't want to see you saying, go read the Quran, and you yourself are not reading it, because as they grow up, they're the ones who they can feel the hypocrisy in your words. They can sniff hypocrisy very easily. So they have to understand that their parents' behavior is the way they preach. So you yourself have to have an attachment to the Quran. And that's why it's very beautiful for your children to see you making your Quran journaling and listening to lectures and putting your effort into studying the Quran. That way they will feel that you look to the Quran as something very important. Okay. And the last step we talked about was toys, you guys. Toys. If you guys noticed today, I sent you guys some things from TikTok. You guys can go back and learn from people that the ways they teach the games. There are game boards. There are computers like this, if you notice. There are so many fun ways you can have fun with your child when they're learning the Quran. And we talked about toys. Many of you guys are like, no, but toys, let them just play and, do whatever they want. You guys, there are a lot of toys out there that are useless. The more you understand Islam more, the more everything has meaning to you. Even the toy should be something useful for your child, So we want to get something through this toy. We want to benefit. We want our child to benefit from it. So you are going to give your child toys. Instead of it being Monopoly, you can make a game board that has to do with the surah of the Quran. And you can go to Pinterest, you can go to TikTok, you can go to Instagram, you can go to websites, and you'll notice that there are a lot of, toys that are related to the Quran out there, and you can order them, and you can make use of them. And you yourself can make your own toys. You can make your own games, the way you're playing with your child. You can be playing with your child and doing a Quran game. And this way they won't feel it. And all of these things are making them love the Quran. So this is the main focus, or the core focus at this age, that you are trying to make your child attached and love the holy Quran. Okay? So that's those things we talked about last time. So now we're going to go on to the new stuff. We've got 2 more phases to talk about. We've got the 5 to 10 years right now. Okay. From 5 to 10 years, now they're learning to read and write, you guys. Okay. So this is the main phase where they're going to be memorizing the Quran. I'm not saying that from age 3 to 5 they don't memorize. Of course they are, because we said that they're going to be listening, they're going to be listening to the Quran. So they're like sponges. So they're going to be memorizing things, and you're going to be surprised that they memorized. But these were things that they took like that, out of like just repetition and in hearing the Quran being recorded or you repeating the surah of the Quran. But here we're going to get into the Quran. This is the most important phase in memorizing the Quran. If you can have your child memorize the Quran by 10 years, that would be excellent. Why, sisters? Because the more they go on in their education, it gets harder, you know? Like, when they reach like ninth grade, eighth grade, ninth grade, they start having a lot of homework. And I want to tell you guys something. Just keep this in mind. When they're younger, they listen to you more. They look to you more. You can, when they get older, they have a lot of things that start to, distract them. They start to be more individual, and many times they're not going to listen to you. But when they're young, they look up to you. So that's why you want to make use of before they reach 10 years. You know why I'm saying 10 years? Because if you think about girls, some girls, they reach puberty at 10, 11 years old. And you guys know when they reach puberty, they start getting distracted, distractions. They start their hormones. They start thinking about other things in life. Okay. So if you could, before 10 years, 12 years, the earlier, the better. The more you've got a strong plan, the more you know where you're going, you can get there. But it doesn't have to be by 10 years because you guys, everybody has their own, children are different. You can't compare children to others. So everybody's got their own journey. So what are you going to be focusing on from 5 to 10 years? From 0 to 5, we said we want to focus on making them love the Quran. So they're starting, when you love something, you hold to it. You started the attachment. We want them to become attached to the Quran. So if you were able to make them love the Quran by the age of 5, that's good. Now go on. Now what's going to make them love it even more? From 5 to 10 years, you're going to do something called inspire your child's inner self-talk. What does it mean to inspire your child's inner self-talk? What does this mean? It means, like when your children are young and you keep telling them, Mom, I want you to get good grades. What is our inner self-talk today? Like, what is your inner self-talk? It's the things that you listen to from your parents a lot, the things that they always kept talking about. When you hear your children, your mom and dad talking about something and repeating it over and over, it becomes your inner talk. Yeah, we talk to ourselves. We've got an inner voice. This inner voice inside of us is a mirror to the things we always used to hear our parents tell us. So if our parents used to always tell us morals, be respectful, inside we're going to be talking about that. When our parents keep telling us good grades, you start talking about that. When they talk about career ambitions, and for instance, you put in your mind that you want to become a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer or this and that, or nurse or a teacher, you keep talking about it. So here, what are we going to try to do? We're going to try to make the inner voice inside of your child from 5 to 10 be inspiring them with the Quran, admiring the Quran, making the Quran like something great. Like how parents are always like, you're going to become a doctor, right? And you ask your children, remember that question you always ask your children when they're just like when they become like 4 or 5 years old, you start telling your child, what do you want to be when you grow up? Right? And they start to say, I want to be a teacher. I want to be this. I want to be that. Right? So here, this is the question, you're trying to inspire them to love the Quran. You want them to admire the Quran. You want them to admire the people that memorize the Quran. You want to make them like something very great, role models, stars for them, like how they make cartoons and they have these certain characters and you're like, oh, I love that character and I want to be like that. You want to try to instill in them that your inner self-talk, the thing that you should talk to yourself about always is the Quran. I want you guys to understand that the Quran, for me as a parent, this is the message you want to give your son or daughter, that the Quran for me is the most important thing. So I want you to understand that I want you guys to admire the Quran wherever you go. Look, Mom, mashallah, this child memorized this many juz's of the Quran. Look, Mom, this is the masjid where they teach Quran. This is the alim or the scholar that teaches Quran. You want to make it like their role model. So for this reason, when you make something big in the eyes of your children, they'll strive to reach it. That's going to be their inner talk always. So always talk about the Quran. Why am I telling you from age 5 to 10 to keep talking about the Quran? Because your child at that age is not going to be telling you, Mom, why do you always bring up the religion? I can tell you guys this. From age 5 to 10, anything you say about the deen, anything you say about the Quran, they're not going to say anything. They're going to accept it from you. But when do they start telling you, Mom, why do you keep talking about the Quran? Why do you have to bring up the deen and everything? After the age of 10, 11, 12. Okay? So for this reason, you want to try to get them connected to the Quran in this age, because here they're going to be listening to you. So talk about the Quran all the time. Try to listen to the Quran always in the car. Connect their questions to the Quran. Like if somebody asks you, why can't we do this? Why don't we do that? Why can't we go here? Why is this wrong to do? Make the Quran your day-to-day language and refer to it, you know, and make it the central place where you make your decisions. Like every time you want to say something, you're going to go back. Well, what does Allah say in the Quran? Here they're going to listen to you. You're making the Quran the centerpiece of your conversation. They're not going to say anything. But after the age of 10, if you didn't instill that the Quran is the center and the focus of your life, and this should be your inner voice, and you go on to the teenage years, you're going to be like, oh, there goes mom again, talking about the deen. You have nothing to talk about, Mom. But if you make them used to that from when they're children and make it like the biggest thing and the biggest focus for when they're 5 to 10 years, they're not going to go against that. Yes, Sister Layla, feel free to ask or comment.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
I have well, when I'm with my kids in the cars, especially, they like to listen to the nasheed, and
Yeah,
then I put like only vocals nasheed, and
right.
then sometimes I would put Quran, but they will prefer, like, they'll protest. I want the nasheed, and
Yeah,
so I'm trying to I want to get away from nasheeds and more Quran, but how do I do that when
yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
it's going to take some time. I'm not against the initiates, and we have to understand that everything has its time, okay? But what happens is sometimes, like the nasheed, it's more fun to the child than the Quran is. So if you introduce it at an early age, what happens is they start to prefer the nasheed over the what? Over the Quran. So since you already have been putting it's not wrong to put the nasheeds. I mean, everything has its time, but you're going to start to try to make it at a certain time. Like, for instance, after they hear the Quran. But you want the truth. If you want the truth, what's going to be happening is the energy of their memorizing and the energy of their sponge brains is going to be going towards the what? The nasheed. And like I said, they memorize very easily. So if you just give the nasheed there, they're going to put their energy into the nasheed. Try your best.
Yeah,
Try
I
your best.
try to, like,
Yeah,
negotiate. Like I said, oh, when we're on our way to school is Quran, and then
yeah.
on our way back from school is nasheed.
Right.
um,
Yeah, that's a good thing. You know why?
yeah,
Because when they're going home, that's a good idea. Wallah, Sister Layla. Because when they're going home from school, they're exhausted, you know? So yes, you could do that. But usually at the beginning of the morning and the day, that's when they're going to be really receptive. So yeah, try to make it Quran and try your best to give the priority to the Quran. The more you put the Quran for them, the more you're helping them to memorize it and to, reflect on it. So how like you put, like, for instance, the salt and the pepper on food, you put it in a certain measurement, right? If you put too much salt, too much pepper, even if it was a delicious food, it's not going to be delicious, right? So it should be like the herbs, at a certain time, the nasheeds. Put the priority for the Quran, because that way they're going to put all their energy into the nasheed and they're going to leave it for the Quran, you know? So, and if any of you guys, sisters, do have little kids, my nasiha for you guys, my advice is, like the nasheeds, introduce them later on. Keep your focus on the Quran. Let them, absorb as much as they can of the Quran. And if you already have introduced the nasheeds, it's not wrong, but just give it less time. Give it less time than the Quran. So inshallah, because we don't want to waste that energy. Remember when I told you guys they've got a lot of energy, they can memorize better than adults. So we don't want to put their energy into the nasheed. We want to put it more into the what? Into the Quran. All right. So like you said, Sister Layla, I mean, if you do it that way, inshallah, it's fine. Like when you're going home, because they're going to be exhausted anyways. Okay.
Yeah,
So
and I
we
try
want
to
them.
look for nasheed. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, go ahead.
Nasheeds that have words that like repeating, like Subhanallah, like dhikrs. Nasheeds that
Yeah.
have those words like Allah mentioning Allah constantly or the Prophet. Then nasheeds that are just mainly talking about just not any dhikr in there, you know. And
Right. Yeah,
I,
that's good. Yeah, we should also have like the nasheeds we choose, like you said, they should have a purpose, right? Teaching them a dhikr or a name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the salah ala nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Yeah, that's a very important thing. And then let me tell you something. Make it like you said, Sister Layla. Stay away from the music. Why? Because when you get obsessed with music, what happens is they will see the Quran as something not nice. And then pay attention, like little kids, maybe they don't like the Abdul Basit. They like you have to choose a person that reads the Quran in a very beautiful way to attract them. So for this reason, don't choose the reciters that like make the ayahs very long and they take a long time to say it. Like we want it a moderate um, reading or recitation of the Quran. So even it would be worse if you put the music, like a nasheed with music, okay? And anyways, it's haram. The music is haram, but I'm saying it would be worse because with the music, it's going to make them just prefer the music. Music is an addiction, by the way. It is. So we should be very selective when we choose the nasheed that we're going to be putting for our child. Or you could leave the nasheeds, by the way, when they're playing also, Sister Layla. Like when you're playing in the house or they're doing something, like they're playing a game or you could
yeah,
leave the nasheed for that, because here you need like something to get them motivated and work. I mean, you're not going to sit there and put Quran while they're playing soccer or playing a game. You get what I'm saying? But when they're sitting in the car, I think they should listen more to the Quran. And also, it doesn't have to be always just putting the Quran. I want to say something here. I mean, them being with you in the car, they're sitting with you, so you have a chance to get quality time with them and ask them how their day was and what happened to them. A lot of parents, what they do is they use the Quran as like, I don't know what the word I can use as, but like they use it as like an excuse for them. They're like, okay, well, I have the Quran for my children. I don't need to talk, you know? But no, you should use also the time you have with your children in the car to talk to them, to discuss things with them, ask them what they think, get closer to them, right? So we don't want to just turn on the Quran in the car and you don't talk to them in the car and you don't talk to them when you go home. No, also talk to them. So yeah, that's why it would be good for you to put the nasheeds when you're going home. And at that time, you could be talking to them about what was happening during that day, because you can't talk when there's Quran on, right? So that's a good idea, Sister Layla. Sister Noor said when they're little, they don't understand the lyrics, just the what? Just the melody, right? So they're just looking for something to just the melody that's coming out of it. But what are they going to benefit from it? Not too much. They would benefit more from the what? From the Quran. So give it your priority. Yes. Um, so we have to show our children that the Quran is my major and primary concern from them, and that anything after the Quran is a secondary concern. Okay. So that's a very important thing that we have to work on. Now, I'm also going to tell you guys during this phase from 5 to 10, I want you guys to stress on the following things. Pay attention to these things. Number one, you guys know that during this period of time from 5 to 10, they are starting to recognize letters. I mean, picture, they're going to be in preschool, right? They're going to be in kindergarten. I mean, I know some of you guys, your children will probably be in preschool and they're learning some letters, but usually they're going to master the letters and start to read when they become from 5 to 10. Okay. So now they're starting to recognize letters and they're starting to be able to read. So keep in mind the following things. Number one is you want to start to understand your child's capabilities because you're starting their journey with the Quran. So you guys know that not every child is the same. I mean, you've got children that can memorize more than other children, and they're the same brothers and sisters. So here you want to discover the capabilities of your son and daughter. So what do? Like you start giving them Quran, or you start letting them listen to the Quran and see how much they can memorize. So you're discovering your child's capabilities. That's number one, to discover their capabilities and try to understand how much Quran they are capable of memorizing. Another thing is you want to create some kind of atmosphere or environment where the children understands that the Quran is something like it should be their ambition, something that it's a normal thing in their day, that every day they have to give the Quran, some kind of time. So you're starting to get them have some kind of routine in life. And you are introducing the Quran that just like they eat and they drink and they play. So in their routine, every day there should be some time for the what? For the Quran. Because if you don't get them used to this routine of reading Quran every day or memorizing Quran every day, they're going to have a problem with that when they grow up. Like when their children are 7 years old. Many of you guys might be like, well, okay, they didn't reach puberty when they're 7 years old. Well, why did the Prophet tell the parents that they should start teaching them the Salah at 7? It's because we want them to develop to make it a habit, to make it something normal in their life. So we're trying to introduce the Quran to them as one of the routines of their life, but not a routine they do, unconsciously. No, something that comes from ambition, something that they are looking forward to. So that's another thing. So you are understanding your children's capabilities and you're introducing the Quran as a routine that they do every day, a daily routine. Another thing is you want to think about how to teach your child to read the Quran. Now, I can tell you guys something. Many people, they like to depend on, memorizing by hearing the Quran. But I can tell you something. I feel that memorizing the Quran by reading it and seeing it makes it stronger. Why? Because if you ask me, for instance, like when I memorize a page of the Quran, what happens to me, it's like I build this image in my mind, how the Quran is written in the Mus'haf. So I'll be like memorizing Surah Al-Baqarah, and I know that this page starts off with this ayah and ends with this ayah. So here we want to work on them reading Arabic. That's what I'm trying to tell you now. I know that many of you guys are living in the West, and some of you guys, Arabic is not your language. And some of you guys probably can't read Arabic very well. But you guys, we have to understand something. If we want our children to be attached with the Quran is in Arabic. So that means that we have to work on our Arabic for our children. So Arabic is a must. We're not going to try to give them transliterations to read the Quran with a transliteration. No. So we have to work on Arabic. So Arabic goes with the Quran. So here we have to have another plan how to teach our children Arabic. And this is something major, and I want to go into it. And this leads me to number 4, that the greatest form of education for you to give your child, if you can, is to give them a personal tutor for the Quran and to teach them Arabic. You guys, we spend so many dollars on clothes and going on vacations and this and that and buying them toys. We have to understand that we have to teach our children Arabic. We have to teach them Arabic. You guys might say, well, there are a lot of people that memorize the Quran and their Arabic is not their language. But no, we're going to come to the next phase. We want them to understand what they're reading and what they're memorizing. So here Sister Noor says, also, if Arabic is not your first language, your brain might actually hear the sounds of your own language and repeat it incorrectly. Could you explain that, Sister Noor? Because I really didn't understand it well.
Yeah,
you?
so
Yeah,
yeah, of course. So like when you like let's like English is my first language.
right,
My brain might not actually hear the dald or hear the subtle differences. Like there's a
yeah,
huge difference when when you're hearing it, your brain interprets it as what you're familiar with. But when
right,
you're
right,
actually reading, you can read and you're able to visualize the differences.
right,
You um your pronunciation, your retention is going to be better because
right.
you're not it's not coming through the filter of your own language that your brain has been programmed with.
Programs by, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially Arabic Arabic is a very fluent language and it's a very strong language. And like you said, there are letters that are in the Arabic language that are not in the English language. For instance, the dad, we have D in English. We don't have the dad. For instance, the qaf. Well, actually, the Q could be like the qaf, right? Um, the ta, we have a T in English, but we don't have a ta, those harsh letters. Khussa, daghtin, qid. The. We have a the like the in English, but we don't have a the. So, for instance, these are very important because they call it in Arabic makharij al-huruf. You have to learn from an early time in your life how to the phonics or the sounds, how they come out. And being familiar with the sound makes you familiar with the what? With the meaning. So you guys should invest, sisters, in teaching your children Arabic for the sake of learning the what? The Quran. And even if that means getting a personal tutor and putting money for that. I mean, why is it that we invest so much money in their clothes and in what they eat and in a lot of things? I mean, and then we come and look to the smallest things that have to do with the Quran tutor. Why? You know? And we should try to get the best tutor we can for our child and to teach them Quran and to teach them also the meanings of the Quran. And you guys today, I mean, you don't even have to get a personal tutor. There are a lot of institutions out there. Just go online and you'll find so many institutions. They have teachers that teach your child the Quran. Many times you're like, okay, I don't have anybody around me. No, you can go online. You will find people that can teach. Today, you know what? I remember when I was in the Masjid in Nabawi, when I was in Medina, and I would be praying in the Masjid in Nabawi, and I would be seeing some sisters with the headphones on, and what they were doing is they're giving classes of tajweed and reading the Quran to people in all parts of the world. You can register your child to be taking classes in the Masjid in Nabawi from home. So for this reason, it's not going to cost that much, but even if it does, invest in it. This is the best investment you can invest in your child. And I want to remind you guys, the more you put effort on your children when they're young, it becomes easier when they grow up. And now they're listening to you. 5 to 10, you can still control them. You can control them. But like also here, I want to bring up something, giving them the iPhones, giving them the iPads. You have to be very, very strict on that, not giving it to them open, doing whatever they want. So they will listen to you during this period of time. But when they reach puberty, they're going to be like, they have other distractions in life. They have other things that they want to work on. So you help your children because they're not going to help themselves. You know better for them when they're at this age. So that's why, sisters, because in this phase they're learning to read, that means invest in teaching them Arabic, invest in them learning the pronunciation of the letters the right way, invest in them to be able to read the Quran the right way, and give them the best teachers you can find. Why is it that we want to give them the best clothes, the best brand names? But then when it comes to the Quran and the Arabic, we're like, they're too young and I don't want to put pressure on them. No, mashallah, they're like sponges. So teach them Quran, Arabic. Not because it's not a matter of, okay, I'm not Arab. Why should I teach them Arabic? You guys know our love for Arabic is not because I'm an Arab. The best language, the most precious language for all of us should be Arabic. Why? Because it's the language of the Quran. It's the language of the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And it's a very strong and fluent and eloquent language, subhanallah. And I can tell you guys that because I'm bilingual. And saying things in Arabic is very different than saying it in English. Arabic is just more, it's stronger. Wallahi, it is stronger. And it means more. So work, sisters, in this period of time, teach them Arabic. Don't wait till they become older. They're not going to have any sabr. They're not going to have patience for that. They're going to have too many studies. So start with that. Teach them Arabic and teach them Quran and get them the best tutors, and understand that you are investing, you know, this is the best investment you can make for your children. Yeah. And make it a part, like, you know how you pay the bills and you pay for their schooling and you pay for their clothing? You have to make a budget. There is something called every month I pay for my Quran tutor, and put them together. Like if you have brothers and children, the same siblings, if they're almost like the same age, put them together. They'll learn together. Okay. And if you have the ability to teach them, that would probably be better. But I can tell you something, sometimes children, they learn more from other people. They're more consistent with other people. But maybe if it's with you, they'll be like, no, mom, I don't feel like it. But that way, you know, look at this child, you know, when he knows he has a class, he goes and he opens and he, you know, he starts to learn with the teacher or the tutor. So this is a very important thing to keep in mind. So that's from 5 to 10 years that we try to explain to the child and make them understand that the most important thing that we want you to focus on in life is what? Quran education. I want to go back to the expression that I used. Inspire your child's inner self-talk. That's their inner self-talk. That's what they're going to be talking to themselves. Oh, I want to memorize the Quran. Oh, I want to read the Quran. You know, because they keep hearing it from you. You're stressing on it. You're giving it importance. You're giving it priority in their life. And so for this reason, you're doing your best to connect your child in every aspect of life with the Quran, answering their questions through the Quran, trying to, you know, give your children the best Quran teaching, the best tutor, trying to discover their capabilities. Oh, I noticed that my son, Ahmed, he can memorize, mashallah, he can memorize a whole surah in one day. But maybe Muhammad, no, he probably needs a week. It's okay. Don't compare them to each other. Don't tell Muhammad your brother is smarter than you. No, everybody's got their capabilities. But it doesn't mean if they're two brothers or even if they're two twins that they have to be going in the memorization at the same pace. I'm sorry. No, this son can go faster. So it's okay. His capabilities are more. Okay, so work on that. Discover your child. You know how you discover your child at an early age and you look at them and you're like, the way my child is acting, it seems like his career in the future is going towards him being an engineer, or he seems like he would make a good nurse. You know how you're discovering their career at an early age? Well, discover their capabilities and see how much they are capable of memorizing the Quran, and then just apply that in your goals and in your Quran plans, inshallah. Now we reach the last phase, which is from 10 to 17. All right. And here we're going to be, we're still going to be going on in the memorization. Okay. Some children, they might have already had the Quran memorized. Some of them. We said everybody has different capabilities. So if your child had already memorized the Quran by 10 years, okay, that's great. But even if they did memorize the Quran, let me tell you something. There's something called tathbeet. Tathbeet means to make the Quran steadfast. They have to keep working on it more and more and more so that they can, you know, have a good grip of the Quran. Because it's like they've just memorized it from the beginning, but they could forget. So here they're going to be having to work on it more and more so that they have a strong memorization of the Quran. So if they memorized, work on making them have a stronger memorization. If they're not finished, okay, we'll still keep going on with the memorization of the Quran. But here we're going to introduce something stronger with the Quran, which is the understanding of the Quran, applying the Quran with the memorization. So here we want them to understand the Quran. And of course, we already started that off at an early age. Remember when we used to do the bedtime stories and we started to play the games? I mean, what are the games for in the bedtime stories? This is a type of, understanding the Quran. And even when they were from 5 to 10, remember when we said like they have questions and so you answer them from the Quran? So it's something we already started off, but here we're going to go into depth that, okay, remember that Quran journaling you were going through? Well, here it's going to pay off. Now you've got the information. So you could make like a weekly session. Today we're going to be talking about this surah, and we're going to go into depth and we're going to learn the life skills from this surah. So here you want to, explain to your child that we are not just going to read the Quran. We're not just going to recite the Quran. We're not just going to memorize the Quran. The most important thing is that we apply the Quran. And this is something we even take from the companions of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that, they always would take, not more than 10 ayahs at a time so that they could recite and understand and, just act upon the ayahs that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent them. So Allah is going to take us accountable of what? Applying the Quran and practicing it. We don't want to just memorize it and boast and brag that I memorized 20 juz'as of the Quran. Here we want to understand the Quran. So you can do a lot of things. Here, let me tell you guys something. I mean, even when you guys help your children to memorize the Quran, I really do believe that you should do, like, how they have like mind maps, and you should come to your child and tell them, this surah is going to be talking about this and that and that. And this makes their memorization stronger. So you should, at an early age, always the surah that they memorize, give them the meanings and try to apply it to life. But here, when they're from 10 to 17, you're going to do what? You're going to start to give it more of a priority, the understanding of the Quran, because now they're getting more mature and you can get into discussions with them and they're going to start asking more questions. So here you can go into the understanding more. So here, let me tell you guys something. If you yourself as a parent here are not going to be able to pitch in the Quran process with the reading, because Arabic is not your mother tongue, so you had to get a tutor to teach them to read the Quran with tajweed, well, at least you can work here in the terms of the understanding. I mean, you guys can work on yourselves. You can read the tafsir, you can reflect on the surahs, you can go back to the ulama and see what the surah means. And here you can give the understanding of the surah, okay? So here it's very important we don't want it to just prioritize memorization. We want them to understand and apply what they are memorizing, okay? Whether it's you that lets them understand what the surah is. And I can tell you guys, there are a lot of like YouTube videos that talk about, for instance, the meaning of Surah Al-Fil, the story behind it. So you've got a lot of things, resources you can get access to that will help you, inshallah, to make them understand the surah. You can do games. You can do, I remember when I was teaching my children, for instance, like, وَالشَّمْسِ وَضُحَاهَا, right? وَالْقَمَرِ إِذَا تَلَاهَا. The way I would let them memorize, I would be making like, I would be doing like gestures, like, okay, this is the shams, وَالْقَمَرِ إِذَا ضَحَاهَا, وَالنَّهَارِ إِذَا جَلَّاهَا. Nahar means the daytime. وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا يَغْشَاهَا. I would do like this for them. It's time to sleep. So like the child, when they would be reading the surah, they would be doing these gestures, and these would help them to understand. They know what they're reading, okay? But of course, you have to understand, my children, their mother tongue was Arabic. So many of you guys, maybe their mother tongue is English. So here you're teaching them Arabic, see? So al-layl, al-nahar, you have to teach them Arabic. You have to. It's very important. Here, I want you guys to pay attention to what's in the box right here. It's really important. Oftentimes, parents encourage their children to memorize only at a young age. And then they'll say, let them memorize now and they'll understand later. Okay, I did talk about this last time, and I did say that our children, their brains are like sponges, so we want to make the best out of them memorizing. But we don't want to say, let them memorize now and understand later. Because what happens is, usually what happens is later never comes. So what happens is because you keep delaying things. And when you delay things, what happens is they've got a lot of things memorized. So how are you going to go back and explain it to them? So you might as well, the surah that they are memorizing, explain it to them. Especially, they usually start off with Juzu Amma, the small surahs. So explain it to them, make games, make mind maps, make them pictures. Well, I used to make pictures and let them, you know how you make coloring books? I'm sure if you guys go online, you will find coloring books for Surat Abasa or Surat, Surat Al-Fil. So for this reason, I want you guys to have more purpose in the things you buy your children. Instead of buying your child any coloring book that doesn't have any meaning, it's more of like cartoons and stuff like that. No, go online and dig in and try to find coloring books with purpose. And even if you didn't find coloring books, you can go online and you can find pictures of, for instance, an elephant, a fil. You will find them and make your own coloring book. Like, for instance, Surah Al-Shams, let's go back to it. وَالشَّمْسِ وَضُحَاهَا. Go online and get a picture of the Shams, the sun, and a picture of the moon, and a picture of the daytime, and the picture of the nighttime. This is your job. It's like your teachers, you guys. Mothers are teachers. You have a job. You have a job. So don't think that you're just a mother at home. No, you are a teacher, every single one of you guys. So when you have it planned out and you know that your child this week, you're going to teach them this surah, so you're going to plan it out. You're going to make all your games have to do with that surah. The coloring has to do with that surah. Your stories have to do, the bedtime stories, with that surah. So if you combine everything that you're going to be doing that week for that surah, it's going to make them memorize it. Picture your bedtime story has to do with the surah, and the coloring has to do with the story, with the surah, and the games they're going to be playing with the surah, So it just helps you because you've got everything planned out. This is the way a Muslim is. A Muslim walks with purpose and has everything planned out. Nothing comes like that randomly, you guys. So don't keep delaying and saying, okay, let them memorize now and they'll understand later. What happens? What happens? They don't understand a single verse they memorized, and you fall into a crisis. And of course, that's not acceptable. And it's a big failure on our part as parents, because what's happening is we are producing children that memorize the Quran, and they believe that the memorization is their crown achievement. And they don't realize that understanding and acting upon what they memorized is the biggest challenge in life. And that's what they're going to be taken accountable of on the Day of Judgment. So we don't want just children that memorize the Quran and we go boasting and bragging and they don't understand anything. What did they benefit out of that? Okay, so we have to work on that. And even if you've got a tutor and your tutor, that they're working on Surah Al-Layl or Surah Al-Shams, you as a mom, make every action you do at home to help that tutor and to instill the principles and the morals and the skills and anything, that the qualities and the values that came with that surah. The whole week you work on it yourself. Okay. And I remember when I was a teacher in school, I remember the principal, she used to do something, it's like comprehensive work. We all work together. She would be like, okay, we're going to make a theme, and we want, like, when the science teacher talks about this and the math teacher talks about this and the dean talks about this, we're all talking about the same topic. Okay, so it's like when I'm a dean teacher and I'm talking about the 5 pillars of Islam, also the math teacher, when she's teaching her children 5, let's put it this way, let's say I'm teaching a first grader and my dean class this week is about the 5 pillars of Islam. Okay. And then I come and tell the math teacher that this week you're going to be giving the children the number 5. So instead of saying 5 birds or 5 buildings, I want you to say 5 pillars of Islam. So she's repeating the thing that I'm saying in the what? In the deen, So we help each other to make this value or this information stick in the mind of the what? Of the student. So that's a very important thing. Okay. We have to understand that we want our children to understand what they are memorizing. We don't want them to just be people that memorize. And here it's very important that they have to make some kind of relationship with the Quran, and we have to try to enroll them in some kind of program. Because I can tell you guys, if you're just going to rely on yourself, many times you're going to be tired, many times you're going to have guests over, and every day you're just going to be delaying it. So this way you can force yourself to have your child every day take that Quran class. You think about it. Is it going to be a full-time program, or is it going to be a part-time program? And stick to it, because there are 5 important things that your child needs in this phase from 10 to 17. You have to sit there and make sure that you've chosen a program. What's the program you chose for your child? Is it a full-time or a part-time Quran class? And they also need structure. What's your plan? Like, you can't just get a Quran tutor and say, okay, let them memorize this surah. You have to have a structure. You have to have it planned out. What are they going to be taking this week? What are they going to take next week? For instance, I want, every month for them to finish half a juz'u. You have to have it planned out. So you chose a program, how many times a week they're going to be taking Quran. Then you choose a structure, because now you know how many times a week they're going to be taking Quran. So you're going to, like a teacher, you're going to prepare. This class, they're going to take this. Next class, they're going to take that. And always when you teach them Quran, you have to pay attention that what you teach them now, this is something new, but you always have to go back and you go back to what they memorized previously, because that way they'll forget it if they don't. So you have to give time. For instance, today they have an hour of Quran class. You can say like 30 minutes could go to the new surah, and another 30 minutes could go to going over the surahs that they already memorized, so that they can, have it strongly memorized. Another thing that they have to have is consistency. And sometimes that's why I always tell you, you should have a tutor. Because if you're going to be the person who's going to give them, sometimes you'll be like, making excuses. Today I have guests over, tomorrow I have this and that. So this way, if you have a program, you're consistent. So every day, every other day, they have a class. Number 4, accountability. Like if, for instance, if they were supposed to memorize this part of the surah, you hold them accountable. You have to tell them, why didn't you memorize? Why was there one ayah that you didn't memorize good? So you have to take them accountable. And number 5, if you're planning on getting a tutor, that tutor is going to be 2-in-1. That tutor is going to be a Quran tutor, but at the same time, they're going to be a mentor. It should be somebody that your child looks up to, because believe me, children, they benefit from people that are, sometimes they benefit from people that are outside the household more than they do from their parents. And I remember when I was a teacher in school, many of the parents would come to me and they're like, please, our children, they look up to you and they respect you and they listen to your word more than they do to ours. Could you please bring up this topic? So your Quran teacher or the tutor, you could privately talk to her about things that you want her to discuss more to your child. So it's like 5-in-1. So you've got a program, you've got a structure planned out, you're consistent, you and the tutor, you hold them accountable. Why didn't you memorize today? And you also get the mentorship from that person who's teaching the Quran. Because of course, if you're going to teach Quran, you have to be a role model. And pay attention that the Quran is going to give them their identity. The Quran will make them relate to everything in life with the Quran. All their questions, they're going to connect it to the Quran and to the stories of the Holy Quran. Now, the last 2 things we want to talk about in this phase are 2 things I want you guys to consider. The first thing I want you guys to consider during this period from 10 to 17 is that during this phase, they're starting to mature and they're starting to get a lot of questions, okay? And here I want you guys to pay attention that you want to bring up the understanding of the Quran during this period. You want the understanding and the memorizing to be parallel. So you have to bring up the understanding of the Quran. Otherwise, what they're going to think is the Quran is some kind of irrelevant piece of literature. okay? And it has no impact on their life. And we don't want that to happen. We want them, because now they're starting to get more questions in life. And we want them to understand that the Quran answers those questions. It's an answer to your question. If you don't relate the Quran and the understanding of the Quran to their questions, they're just going to think of it as like a piece of poetry or some kind of ancient sayings or revelation from a God that has no impact on their life. And that's one of the worst things that a person could feel in their life. The Quran has no impact on their life. You know what it means when you feel the Quran has no impact on your life? It's not important. No, we want them to feel that it's like the center of everything in your life and it answers all your questions. So always use the Quran to answer the questions of your child. And in this way, you're making them understand the what? The Quran. If you yourself can't do it, then pay attention to the institutions or the teachers or the tutors who teach your children. Explain to them that you want them to what? Explain the meanings of the Quran and not just let it go like that and have them memorize the Quran. So that's a very important thing to keep in mind. Now that they're getting a lot of questions, then answer them. Answer them how? With the Quran. The last piece of advice that has to do with, things that you should consider is that during this period of time, they're more rebellious. Okay? That's why I told you guys, remember when I told you from 5 to 12? Work on them as much as you can, because from 10 to 17, the older they get, like 10, it's easier than 11. 11, it's easier than 12. 12 is easier than 13. When they start reaching puberty, and especially girls, because they reach puberty usually before boys. Girls sometimes 10, 11 years old, okay? What's going to happen? They're going to start rebelling. They're going to be like, I don't feel like it, they're trying to avoid the class. They're trying to say, Mom, I've got a test tomorrow, so I can't, or I've got some kind of presentation to do. Okay, so here, what's our advice about if you have rebellious children? You have to understand something. If you worked on them before, you're going to already have most of the memorization and things done because you made a connection from before. But still, you never know what comes up. You have to understand that this phase of life is either you make it or you break it. You don't want to mess up everything you built. You want to have the Quran, you want to keep the attachment. So don't come if they rebel and start pressuring them, okay? Don't start talking to them in a mean way or making them feel that the Quran is some kind of chore that they don't have pleasure in doing, or it's a burden on them, or they get beat up for not memorizing the Quran, because they're going to relate. They're going to form an image. They're going to be like, Quran means mom is screaming. And yeah, I want to say that this is important. They form an image of everything they do with you guys. So if they formed an image that every Quran class they had with you was some kind of a discussion that ended up with fighting, or that you were always hiring your voice, or you're like, you have to get your Quran memorized, or you're not going to do this and that. No, you have to be as patient as possible. So for this reason, if they start to rebel, what are we going to say? We're going to say, this is our piece of advice, never, try to pressure them. Never make the Quran be like a burden. Don't treat them bad when it comes to Quran. Try some way, try to be creative and naturally try to find a way or a key to their heart. What is the way that you can get to them? What things can you do together to learn the Quran together and enjoy it? Like if you can be going on a walk and talking about, pondering on the Quran. You can be doing things together and enjoying yourself. Like I said, you have to be creative, that weekly or daily, it depends on how you make it. It's like a weekly session together. You have to make it like really fun. Like for instance, you're going to be doing on that day a barbecue, and you're going to have games, and you're going to go out after that. It's supposed to be the day of the Quran session. I'm talking about the understanding, okay? As for the memorization, it should be every day, daily. But like that Quran session where they're going to talk about the meanings of the Quran, you have to be very, very smart in doing it. Let's say they don't like to listen to you. Then you could, like, for instance, get their friends over and make it like a gathering and bring some kind of Muslim scholar that they like to listen to. Or you can put them in a program if you guys are in a place where, you know, there's mashallah ulama and they know how to deal with teenagers and make it fun. That's why I'm going to go back to the community. You guys don't just think about individuality and you teaching your children Quran at home. You guys get together in a community and try your best to make it like a beautiful way for you guys to meet all those teenagers together and for them to like make beautiful lectures and, you know, like there's a bazaar after it or there's some kind of activity. You know, children like to learn together. So work on it. Just don't keep thinking about it's just my son or just my daughter and I'll get them a tutor. No, sisters, work together as a community. Get together with the mothers and the fathers. Think of a way, getting people. And I have to tell you something. I mean, you guys have to get somebody that's really interesting, somebody that they would be willing to listen to, that they all like and they agree on. And that way they're going to listen to that person. You know, today we're going to be talking about Surah Al-Ish, Surah Al-Alaq, and explaining it. So we want it to be something that they can be looking forward to. So for this reason, you have to work on it. You have to be very smart and creative and find that key to their heart. Maybe they like their social and they like to learn with other students or other people or other friends. Maybe they don't like to sit in a certain place and you just lecture them. No, they would like to be walking or doing something, you know? So you have to, I can't give you anything special or say that this is the only way to make that session. You have to be creative and find the way your child thinks and what they prefer and give it to them in that way. But I do prefer that it also, if there's a family session like sitting together, there should be also some kind of community session and that all the people get together. And even if there's no mosque close to you guys, I mean, if you guys just get their friends together with each other and you guys give them a class or you talk about it. And don't make it like okay, sit here now, we're gonna start the Quran session and nobody talk. No, you guys have to be creative. It's like don't put like some kind of border between you and your son and daughter. Just like chill out and sit together and be talking about it in a way that you're discussing it, you know. Make it something like you could be drinking tea and talking about it, you know, enjoying yourselves. You could be in a place eating in a restaurant and talking about it. So you have to be very creative about that. But, you know, I really did want to talk about the Quran because I feel that the Quran is the medication for all of our problems. The more we strive to make our children attached to the Quran, the more barakah we have in our life, the more we have purpose in life, and the more, inshallah, you know, they will be, you know, looking to the world and morally upright and being the best version of themselves, because the Quran is the best form of tarbiyah, actually. So that's why I you know, chose to make these two classes have to do with the Quran, because the Quran is the source of all the khair. It's the source of all the barakah. It's the source of all the tarbiyah. It's the best gift that we can give our children. And in the end, I hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes this Quran journey a beautiful journey for all of you guys and for your children. And I just want to stress at the end of the class that, like I said, it's not just a journey for your children, it's also a journey for yourselves. So together, you and your children, inshallah, will, you know, make stronger bonds with the Quran and get more attached to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Work on yourself and plan more and, you know, invest more in the Quran and make it your priority, because wallahi, the Quran is more important than all the worldly education we get. And if you think about it, all the worldly education that we give to our children, it is, you know, related to the Quran. Any kind of knowledge, science, math, all of it. Who created all of these things? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, Allah is the one who created the universe, and all of these laws come from the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we want the math and the science and the geography and the history and all of it to make sense. And it cannot make sense if you're going to make it secular, just putting the worldly education here and the Quran here. No, they go together. So prioritize with the Quran and think more seriously about it. And remember the ayah, Ya Yahya, khudh al-kitaba biquwwa. Okay, take the revelation with strength and look more into the Quran and give it your priority, sisters. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make ease in it and to make barakah in every step you guys make towards teaching your children the Quran. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله العظيم لي ولكم وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.